Hey there, welcome back to Batman Week here on the channel, where I'm posting Batman videos all week long leading up to Batman Day. Today I'm going to take a look at another black and white Batman story, the Batman Noir edition of Hush. This was Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee's big sort of blockbuster Batman story from back in the day. And so they've printed this, in just about every format imaginable. And so it was only, a matter of time until they came out with the Noir edition. And so this is the same story, if you're not familiar with the Noir series. It is all in black and white. So if you're a fan of the Batman black and white series of stories, or if you just like really moody Noir Batman, which if you're a Batman fan, how could you not? This is presented in just black and white, so it has all the text and everything from the story, so you can still read it along just fine. But, there are no colors. So, it works really well for Batman typically, just because Batman deals a lot with shadows and just sort of darkness, and so typically you have artists that are really good at kind of spotting blacks and creating like sort of a moodier atmosphere, which translates really well to black and white stories. So typically that is the case. I don't know that it works as well with Jim Lee, just because Jim Lee's art is so detailed here that, especially in a fight scene sort of scenario, it can be hard to track the movement of what's going on and all the characters, and it's a little harder to separate background from foreground here. The coloring does a lot of the heavy lifting here for Lee's art. Not to say that there's anything wrong with Lee's art in that respect, but there's so much going on that you really kind of need the color to help balance things. The other advantage to this is we get to see the sort of watercolor or maybe ink wash pages that Lee did for the story in black and white, which is really nice, because again, these were colored for the series, but it's nice seeing them here in the black and white. It gives a real nice kind of painterly feel to these pages. Again, ink wash ink wash Batman is probably always going to remind me of Tim Sale's art. And I would think that, but I don't know that Lee has spoken on this, but I feel like this is obviously an influence on him too here. So yeah, so this is the whole 12-issue series collected together here in black and white. So if you're a fan of Lee's artwork, this is really something to check out. Now, having said that, I would almost want an artist edition of this. I don't think there is. I think the closest is the Hush Unwrapped collection that came out. Because sort of the big advantage of this book is just kind of seeing the line art and kind of seeing the detail that Jim Lee and Scott Williams are putting down here on the page. That's why I would almost prefer like an artist edition to this, just because of I want to see the decisions that are being made. I want to see the whiteout on the page. If there's notes off to the side, I kind of want to see that. This almost feels like sort of a halfway there. It's like it's sort of just a regular collection. It's almost an artist edition, but not quite. So that's really what I would like to see, as opposed to here. So now here's another issue too where I think the lack of colors really kind of hurts. Is we had a lot of sort of digital effects going on in Hush, and so here you've got Batman in the Batcave using this sort of like infrared keyboard here, and we have these sort of holographic projections here, and it's all in the line work here too, but the color really helps kind of separate that and makes it easier to kind of see the layers to the artwork here of what's going on. And so it's a little clearer what's going on. If you're just looking at the page like this, if you just turn to this, it might be like, oh, are these ghosts or something hanging up here in the cave? Like, what are we looking at here? Because it's sort of like an autopsy kind of thing too that he's looking at. So I think the colors really kind of help the storytelling on this story. And that's not to say that colors usually don't, because they do, obviously. Colors are, an important part of the story, or they wouldn't be there. But I think for the sort of summer blockbuster vibe of Jim Lee's art, I think the colors are almost necessary, especially for this story that featured a lot of sort of like Batman's hood in his helmet and these sort of like cool digital effects And again, you know, Lee is coming from Image Comics, where they kind of innovated digital coloring back in the day, and definitely sort of changed the standard across the industry for how coloring was done back in the 90s. So yeah, and again, you know, this is still an okay way to read this story, but if I had to pick, I think I'm just going to go for the regular collections at this point. Or again, I don't have the Hush Unwrapped collection, but I believe that is supposed to be, like, I don't know if it's pencil art even. A version where you can just kind of see the art easier in that, you know, the original artwork. And so it would be, yeah, it'd just be more interesting to see that version of it, I think, as opposed to this black and white Noir edition. Again, I love black and white Batman stories. That's why I collected the Noir series. If you are interested in Jim Lee's line work, you know, with Scott Williams, this is a great edition to have. And again, the sort of ink wash sections look great in here too. If the whole story had been done like this, I would say this Noir is a must-buy just for that. Now, we have pretty typical hand-drawn line art throughout. But yeah, the colors really, I think, make the difference on this story. I'd say more so than most other Batman stories, actually. And again, that's not a flaw in the line art. I just think that it brought so much to this story that it's almost necessary for this. But yeah, with there also being just so many different ways to read this story. We just did facsimile editions of the whole run. There's, you know, the compact comics, the sort of smaller collection now. There's the Absolute. You know, there's the new 20th anniversary collection. I think they're about to reprint for Batman Day even. You know, they have made it very easy to find and read this story. You know, it's available digitally everywhere. You know, there's really no excuse to not read this story. It's definitely accessible. But I feel like this is probably not the way to read this particular story. And it's too bad because overall I love the Noir series. I don't think that too many of them are in print anymore, if any of them. And I think for the most part they're worth tracking down. But yeah, I feel like if there's one I wouldn't recommend to read this way, it would be Hush. That's even with the sequel being produced right now. You know, we're in the middle of Hush 2 right now coming out. So that's why I wanted to kind of look at this one right now. But yeah, I would say unless you're just a die-hard Jim Lee fan and you want to study his artwork and, you know, still have a copy you can read and everything, I would recommend this for that. But yeah, unless you're just a real serious student of his art, if you're just a casual Batman reader, this is not the way to read Hush for the first time. You really want the colors on this story. And again, there's a plethora of ways to do that. But yeah, unless you're just like a real student of his art, I would probably pass on this one. Again, I can't speak highly enough for black and white Batman stories. I love them. I'll read them all the time. And so, you know, I had to pick this one up too. But yeah, as I, read it, this edition of it, it's lacking something, and it is literally the colors. So yeah, even if, I don't know, maybe if there were like gray tones in it, maybe that would have helped, where it wasn't just the stark black and white. If there were shades of gray, like the ink wash sequences in the book, that could be cool. You know, almost give it sort of like a more black and white movie kind of feel. But yeah, just the stark black and white of this, I feel like is really kind of taken away from the whole experience, which I don't think is the case for most of these editions. But yeah, this one I think really, you need the color on Hush and on Jim Lee's art here. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the Batman Noir edition of Hush. Have you read this? Have you read any of the other Noir stories? What do you think of them? Let me know in the comments below. Again, usually I love these editions, but I feel like this one was kind of a miss because of the way Lee really integrates color and what it does for the storytelling of this particular tale. Be sure to come back all week long. You know, I'm posting Batman videos all this week leading up to Batman Day this Saturday. I've got a playlist where you can watch the other videos I've done this week and last year's. So be sure to come back and check out those videos. And thanks for watching. If you'd like to follow me on social media, I'm on Twitter/X @Detective651, also on Instagram @Detective651. Be sure to check out my t-shirt store at tpublic.com/user/detective651. I've got a lot of nerdy designs on there, and there's sales all the time, so check it out frequently.